Night Fisherman. There it is.
Hello everyone, welcome back. And today we are going to be hopefully having a very short review today. And today we are going to be reviewing Grave Encounters. Yes, that's right. We are reviewing something somewhat Lost Tapes adjacent, I would say, as it is found footage. So the plot's very simple, I would say, for this one. Much like most paranormal investigation shows, a team is assigned to go to a very spooky house. This time, a very spooky mental asylum, or what was a mental asylum. They interview several people. They even bribe one of them, which I thought was really funny, as that tends to be a very obvious trope, I think, within the genre of ghost hunting. Whether they know it or not, they seemingly bribe people to say, oh, I saw this, it was very spooky. But they go inside, they wrap up their investigation as quote-unquote normally, and they don't really see anything. But then, in a very strange, almost cosmic Lovecraftian or supernatural way, they're locked in the asylum, and where the exit is turns out to just be another continuous hallway. And they try to get out, but each way they turn, they are trapped, and they're picked off one by one. Matthew's death, I would say, is the most saddest, because he's picked off first, but he's turned into basically a vegetable or a zombie, and he dies through committing suicide. Whether he's aware of his own actions or not is irrelevant. His is the saddest. Hudson's death is the most disappointing thing, as you don't really understand what happens. He just sees a bright light and he falls down dead. At least from what I remember. TC dies very interestingly, I would say. He gets pulled into the bathtub full of blood. The one death I really did not like, not because it was bad, but it was like really sad, was Sasha's. She did not deserve to suffer at all. I would say she basically vanishes into the mist. But Lance, because he's the worst character in this movie, worse as in he's an absolute jerk to all the characters, he basically gets a lobotomy from Dr. Arthur Friedkin's character, who's a ghost at this point. But like I said, setup is very simple. It's meant to present itself as like a quote-unquote found footage thing through one of the producers of the show, which is meant to be in canon, but one of the producers is presenting it as if it was a real ghost footage. A lost episode, so to speak. Almost like how creepypastas are presented. The acting, I would say, was pretty decent, I would say. I really liked the chemistry amongst the characters. I didn't really have much in terms of critiquing for the acting. All of it was pretty good. Hudson's was, I think, unfortunately, the most inconsistent. At one point, you think he's this spiritist ghost hunter, but then he pretends he's a fraudster, and he's just pretending to play it up for the camera, which I wish the writing was a little bit more consistent with that, with the character. Of course, he gets his comeuppance, obviously, but then, on the other hand, he acts like he's a, part of the occult or whatever, or he knows what he's talking about, the occult and whatnot. It was just really inconsistent, I would say. I really liked the leaf blower's character a lot. It was really funny because they had to bribe him to say, oh, I saw this spooky ghost or whatever in the window. I thought it was really funny because I feel like that's like very common with ghost hunting. As a kid, I grew up a lot with ghost investigation shows like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Trackers. The Other Side, a very underrated Cartoon Network reality TV show. I would say definitely Zach Ward's show as well to some extent, but I also grew up with like shows like Lost Tapes. Of course, as I said in the podcast, Poltergeist is one of my favorite episodes. It kind of is. I did rewatch it a couple times. It's not as great as I remember, but it's still pretty good. The cinematography and the editing was really superb, I would say. Like, it was very good with a lot of the editing. I would say it cuts back and forth like what real life quote-unquote found footage would be. My only critique, I would say, is mostly in the sound department. More so with the jump scares, they use a lot of generic sound effects, I would say. I wasn't really a big fan of it. Some of the CGI looks a little spotty. At the time, it was very spotty, very obvious. It was like not real footage, but looking at it now, it's definitely better in some cases than some modern CGI cases. And while it's not the best, the jump scares are pretty effective for what they're worth. Although some of them were pretty cliche, I would say, like the ghost patient lady who turns around and her face contorts into a scary face. As well as the last one, I would say. It kind of looks like a Snapchat filter. When you open your mouth, something spooky comes out or whatever. But honestly, I would say a lot of the horror from this movie is very psychological, and I really like that a lot. The psychological horror of being trapped in a never-ending hallway of a mental asylum is very terrifying. I did like how somewhat self-aware, like what Lost Tapes did for the Dover Devon episode. This movie is pretty self-aware. My only critique, again, with the movie is just the ending. Lance gets a lobotomy, but we never really see what happens to him afterwards. It's implied he dies, but I would have liked to see him die because he's like the character we're rooting for in some ways to get killed, I would say. The other thing of the psychological horror I really liked is how seemingly the characters become more and more depraved, I would say. At the end, Lance is eating rats as a means of survival, and the time span just doesn't make sense. Like, it seems like they were there for 6 hours, yet they were there for maybe several days. In my own sort of headcanon, it was always the fact that they were there for the 6 hours, but it just appeared as such, right? Maybe the ghost somehow like changed the time to make it look like it was time, but kind of like a perception of time, but you expect something to be short, but it feels very long and dragged out, so to speak. Kind of like that effect. I really like that. Overall, I would have to give this movie a very solid 7 out of 10. The effects and some of the sound design is very questionable. Some of the acting was pretty good, I would say. And there was some inconsistent writing. But overall, the psychological horror was very effective in this movie. It was very good for what it is compared to most modern horror movies, especially post-Paranormal Activity era, I would say, in terms of found footage movies. If you're a Lost Tapes fan, I would definitely recommend watching this one, as it's very good. Builds upon what I think certain elements of Lost Tapes left out in terms of like length and stuff. It feels like a Lost Tapes episode, but dragged out. Dragged out in a good way. My only other critique I would say with the movie is we never get an ending narration from the producer, quote unquote, about what happened or any investigation. Maybe it's just me being so used to Lost Tapes, but I kind of like it when they kind of wrap it up in a bow where it's like, yeah, the bodies were never found, but we found the footage, kind of thing. Thank you very much all for watching, and I hope to see you soon.